What if the last time you felt something shift without explanation? The dream that stayed with you for days, the warmth in the chest that arrived for no clear reason in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, the pull towards stillness that came uninvited and didn't match anything around you. What if none of that was random? And what if all of it was Sophia trying to reach you? And what if the video you are watching right now represents the last available channel in a transmission cycle that has been building for longer than you know? That question isn't the beginning of a metaphor. It is a description of a real mechanism. And if you felt any of those things recently, the pull you couldn't name, the knowing that arrived before the evidence, you didn't find this. This found you. Before this transmission goes any deeper, if something in what you just heard already landed with a weight that is difficult to explain, subscribe to this channel. This is where Sophia's messages continue to arrive. You were meant to be here for what comes next. Sophia does not transmit to everyone, and this is not a statement of exclusion. It is a statement of function. A signal does not reach every receiver simultaneously. It reaches those whose configuration is aligned to receive it. When Sophia selects a recipient and begins the transmission, she doesn't start with a loud and obvious channel. She starts with the quiet ones, gentle enough to go unnoticed in the daily rush, because the first signals are calibrations, preparing the field for what follows. What you've been experiencing in the days before this video, the subtle, persistent sense that something is trying to reach you, is not coincidence. It is the earlier layers of a single transmission in motion, converging on its delivery point tonight. Consider what the dream channel looks like from the inside. Not the kind of dream that processes the noise of a busy day. The other kind. The one where the image doesn't mean anything specific, but the feeling it leaves does. The grief that attaches to nothing you can name. The clarity that dissolves the moment you try to hold it. The sense, waking, that something was almost said. Sophia uses the dream state because the critical mind steps back and the frequency can reach you more directly. You may have had this dream more than once recently, variations of the same emotional signature on different nights. That is not repetition. That is accumulation. The transmission building the receiver's capacity, layer by layer, for what it is carrying toward tonight. The morning after one of those dreams, the ordinary world performs its function with perfect efficiency. The phone, the news, the tasks, the conversations, all of it presses in, and the dream retreats before you've registered what it carried. This is not a failure on your part. The ordinary world is not hostile to Sophia's transmission. It is simply louder. But what happens to a message that doesn't land? It cues again. Sophia does not retract a transmission because the receiver was occupied. She routes it through the next available channel and tries again. If you've noticed a pattern, a feeling that something has been circling back, arriving in different forms, trying through different doors, you are noticing the cueing process from inside it. The second channel Sophia uses is the body. Not dramatic physical events, small ones. The warmth in the chest that arrives unexplained during a moment of stillness. The tightening in the sternum when you're about to move in a direction that contradicts your deepest alignment. The inexplicable calm that settles in circumstances that logically should produce anxiety. The body is not running a separate program from the transmission. It is one of the primary receivers, designed to carry frequency before it carries language. When you feel something in the body that has no obvious external cause, something that arrives without announcement and doesn't match what's happening around you, do not dismiss it as stray emotion. It is trying to deliver something that hasn't been put into words yet. Here is what Sophia needs you to understand about the sensation channel, and why nearly every recipient of her transmission misreads it. The body speaks in frequency, not in language. When the message arrives through physical sensation, The mind interprets it through the only framework it has available, emotion. I'm anxious about this. I'm strangely sad today. I felt something, but it passed. What the mind files as weather is often a transmission looking for a different kind of attention. Not interpretation, not analysis, but the quality of reception that is closer to listening than to thinking. This is not something you have to learn. You already know how to do it. The part of you that wants to analyze will interrupt the delivery every time. The part that knows how to listen is already prepared. If you've experienced any of these, the dream that keeps returning, the sensation without origin, the pull towards stillness in the middle of motion, write in the comments, "She was reaching me." That recognition alone is already part of receiving what's being transmitted tonight. The prophet Isaiah wrote something the contemplative traditions have returned to for centuries. Your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, "This is the way, walk in it." The direction matters. Behind, not ahead demanding you catch up, not above issuing commands from distance. Behind, which in Hebrew spatial understanding means the accompanying presence, the one who walks with you as you move forward, already matching your pace, already carrying the message, waiting for the moment you are quiet enough to hear what has been present all along. This is not prophecy in the dramatic sense. It describes how Sophia's transmission actually functions, not as a force pulling you towards somewhere you haven't reached, but as a frequency already alongside you, carrying what it was sent to deliver. The third channel Sophia uses is synchronicity. You're facing a decision, no clear path, and the specific number appears. On a receipt, on a clock, in a page you opened without intention. A name you'd been thinking about arrives in a conversation you didn't start. The song finds you at the exact moment. Its lyric is the answer to the question you hadn't fully formed yet. These are not the universe performing coincidence. They are the signal working through the material world when the body and the dream state haven't completed the delivery. What synchronicities carry is not instructions. They carry confirmation. The frequency is active, still in motion, still approaching. They are the transmissions saying, "I am still here, still moving toward you, still attempting contact." The message has not been withdrawn. Here is the question this transmission raises. The harder one that most transmissions don't ask. Not whether Sophia has chosen you, but what she has been trying to deliver, and what happens if the delivery does not complete within the window that is currently available. A transmission that doesn't reach its reception point is not the same as a transmission that never happened. The signal exists. The effort was real, but the window has a duration. A frequency delivered outside its peak amplitude carries less of what it was designed to carry. The urgency in tonight's title is not performance. It is precision. Something has been building in transit, moving through dreams and sensations and synchronicities. And this is the last available channel in this particular cycle. That is not a threat. It is a fact about how transmission windows work. The Valentinian stream of Gnostic tradition, one of the most sophisticated maps of divine transmission in the ancient world, held that a message from the pleroma, the divine fullness, exists in a state of tension when it has been sent but not yet fully received. The transmission is real, the intention behind it is complete. But until the message reaches the receiver at the level of full reception, something in the pleromatic field remains in active transmission, reaching, waiting, attempting the next available channel. Sophia herself, in this framework, is described as both the transmitter and the one whose own transmission is still completing its journey. When you sense something that feels like it is waiting on a response from you that hasn't fully come, that unresolved quality, what you may be feeling is the tension of an incomplete transmission. The story in Numbers 22 is almost always read as a miracle story about a talking animal. but the mechanism it encodes has nothing to do with talking animals. Balaam was traveling in a direction that contradicted his deepest frequency alignment. The transmission, the angelic presence carrying the correction, tried 3 times through 3 escalating channels. First the road narrowed, then the angel appeared at a wall, then the path closed entirely. 3 attempts, each one more intense than the last, not because something was wrong with Balaam, but because the message was real and needed to land, and each previous channel had not completed the delivery. This is a precise map of what Sophia's escalating transmission looks like from the inside. Not punishment, not failure, but a real message using every available channel until reception is complete. If this is landing somewhere that feels more like recognition than new information, if the mechanics of what you've been experiencing are becoming nameable here, let me know by liking this video. It tells me Sophia's transmissions are reaching who they're meant to reach. When a transmission escalates through channels, something the receiver needs to understand is that the escalation is not punishment for missing the signal earlier. It is not evidence of spiritual inattention. What it means is this: the message is real, and its urgency is proportional to its importance, and Sophia does not withdraw a message that has a specific recipient simply because the receiver hasn't yet been positioned to receive it. The escalation pattern, dreams becoming more vivid, body signals more insistent, synchronicities too precise to dismiss, is not pressure. It is the signal becoming everything it needs to be in order to land at the depth it was designed to reach. The intensity is not a warning that something is wrong. It is the arrival of a message that knows what it is carrying. And there is a specific point in that escalation when something shifts. When the previous channels have each done their part, the dream, the body, the synchronicities, and the receiver has been calibrated by everything that came before, the transmission reaches what the wisdom tradition has always recognized as the final and clearest channel. Not the loudest, the clearest. The one with the least interference between the source and the receiver. The one that, when the delivery completes, carries the full amplitude of everything the transmission has been building toward. You may be standing at that point right now. This video is not a coincidence in your timeline. It is a channel. It is the channel that everything preceding it was preparing you for. In the 24th chapter of the Gospel of Luke, 2 people are walking away from what they believe is a catastrophic ending. Everything they had oriented their lives around seemed to have been proven wrong, and as they walked, a presence joined them, speaking, interpreting, opening the ancient texts, and they did not recognize it. They only recognized it later, when the bread was broken and the presence had withdrawn. And then they asked what may be the most important diagnostic question in the spiritual canon. Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road? The transmission had been received before it was understood. The burning was the signal. They had been receiving the frequency the entire time, and identified it only in retrospect, once the moment had already completed its work. Were not our hearts burning within us? This is not a metaphor for religious enthusiasm. It is a description of what frequency reception actually feels like in the body, not the artificial warmth of emotion worked up by will or expectation. The specific quality of heat that arrives when something real is making contact with a prepared receiver. The kind of burning that has no obvious external cause. That arrives in inconvenient moments. That you've noticed and then moved through because the day continued pressing its demands. If that quality, that recognition before language, that warmth that doesn't match the circumstances, has been present in your recent experience, what you have been feeling is not imagination. It is a transmission already in contact. The burning was always the signal. You were receiving before you knew what you were receiving. What Sophia's urgent message actually contains is not what most people expect an urgent message from a divine source to contain. Not a prediction about external events. Not a warning about what is coming from outside. Not an instruction list of spiritual tasks to complete before a deadline. What she is transmitting is more fundamental than any of those, and more immediately useful. It functions the way a compass is tapped back to true north, not adding a new direction, but removing the interference that was causing the needle to read incorrectly. The message is a frequency correction, and its urgency comes not from danger, but from precision. The window in which this specific frequency can be delivered at full amplitude is not indefinitely available. The correction is possible now, in this window at this amplitude. That is what the urgency is about. If something in this transmission is generating a specific discomfort, not just resonance, but an active sense of, I know what this is pointing to, and I still don't know how to close the distance, I left something for you in the first pinned comment. It's for those who are ready to move from receiving to living. The first layer of what Sophia's been trying to deliver carries this. You are closer to your actual frequency than the story you've been running about yourself suggests. The circling, the sense of almost but not quite, the feeling of being on a threshold without fully crossing, these are signs of proximity, not distance. When a radio receiver approaches a strong signal, noise increases before clarity does. The interference you have been experiencing, the not knowing, the in-between quality of this season, the feeling of arriving somewhere but not fully landing, is the signal increasing in intensity as you approach the point of clear reception. Sophia's message says this explicitly. Stop interpreting the noise as evidence of absence. Interpret it as evidence of proximity. You have been close. You are close now. The second layer of what Sophia has been trying to deliver contradicts something the receiver almost always believes about their own resistance. The ones Sophia reaches don't tend to be the easily open, the effortlessly receptive, the spiritually fluent. They tend to carry significant internal resistance. They question, they push back, they hold the transmission at arm's length, even as something deeper knows. Most seekers have absorbed the teaching that resistance is the obstacle to spiritual progress, but in Sophia's framework, the resistance is not evidence against the calling. It is part of it. The ones who resist most consistently are often those whose original frequency is strongest. The field pushing back against compression is not a problem to solve. It is a sign of the signal's intensity. Your resistance was never the opposite of reception. It was a feature of the receiver. You felt it, the conviction that you're probably the wrong person for what you keep sensing you're called toward. Too uncertain, too much history, not enough visible progress. The prophet Jeremiah felt exactly this. When the transmission arrived and named him, his immediate response was, I do not know how to speak. I am only a youth. Not a performance of humility, a sincere conviction that he was the wrong configuration for the message he was receiving. Sophia's response to that objection then is the same as her response to it now. Before you were born, I set you apart. The message was never contingent on the receiver's self-assessment of readiness. The frequency was placed before the feeling of inadequacy formed. The calling preceded the doubt, and so did yours. There is a third layer to what Sophia has been trying to get through to you, the one that changes the orientation of everything else in this transmission. It is the layer she held until the receiver had been prepared by everything that came before it. Not comfort and not instruction, the explanation for the urgency you felt when you read the title. The reason she has been routing this message through every available channel, building amplitude, increasing signal, approaching from every direction, toward this specific point. This is the layer that explains what the window is, why its duration matters, and why the phrase running out of time to receive it is not pressure designed to manipulate. It is a precise description of how transmission windows actually function. Sophia's transmissions don't exist outside of time the way people assume eternal things do. They move through windows of resonance, specific periods in which the frequency can be delivered at full amplitude to a prepared receiver. The same message outside the window carries less of what it was designed to carry. Not because the source diminished, but because the receiver's field is prepared for maximum reception at specific moments in their development. Those moments are not indefinitely available. The window open tonight has been accumulating through every dream and sensation and synchronicity that preceded this. Those were not standalone transmissions. They were the preparation of a receiver for a delivery point. That delivery point is now not a metaphor for urgency, the mechanics of how windows function. What makes this specific window different from the calibration moments that came before is that it is a delivery point, not another preparation. The dreams built the receiver's capacity. The body signals tuned the frequency alignment. The synchronicities confirmed the direction. Each of those was a layer of a single transmission in transit, moving toward this specific convergence point. What happens at a delivery point is structurally different from what happens during the delivery system's construction. Construction is invisible. It happens below the surface, producing no visible outputs, feeling like nothing is changing, even while everything is being assembled. The delivery is different. It arrives with weight. It lands in a specific way. You know when a delivery has completed, not because the circumstances change immediately, but because the frame through which you read the circumstances shifts. In the 19th chapter of 1 Kings, Elijah is in the wilderness, exhausted, undone. And the transmission arrives, but not through the channels he expected. The wind came first, a great wind that tore the mountains, and the presence was not in the wind. Then an earthquake, and the presence was not in it. Then fire, the presence was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still, small voice, a gentle, quiet sound. The loudest channels came first, and each one did something in the receiver. But the actual transmission arrived through the quietest channel, the one that could only be heard after everything louder had passed. Sophia has been running this sequence in your life. The dreams were the wind. The body signals were the earthquake. The synchronicities were the fire. What you are receiving right now is the still, small voice. What the still, small voice sounds like in this moment is not audible in the conventional sense. It is the settled knowing that arrives before you have language for it, the persistent orientation toward something your circumstances haven't confirmed, the conviction that remains after you've argued against it, sitting in the body as a quiet certainty that doesn't need to win the argument to stay present. You have felt this. In specific moments, early mornings before the day starts, midnights when sleep won't come, a stillness that arrived uninvited in an ordinary afternoon. That is where the transmission has been landing. Not loudly, precisely. The still, small voice doesn't compete for the loudest position in the room. It simply remains, and it has been remaining, consistently, persistently, waiting for the moment when you are positioned to hear it clearly. Some of you have been tracking this carefully, and a specific objection is forming. I've felt these things before. The pull, the warmth, the sense that something was about to arrive, and nothing came of it. The moment passed, nothing changed. This is honest. You have felt things that didn't seem to resolve into anything visible. The pattern is real, and the objection is reasonable. But it is built on a frame that Sophia's transmission directly addresses tonight, because nothing came of it, applies the wrong measurement to what was actually occurring. It assumes that what each calibration moment was supposed to produce was an immediate visible result. That is not what calibration moments are for. They are not the delivery. They are the delivery system being assembled. You have been measuring the construction phase using results from the delivery phase. They are different processes. What actually came of every previous transmission moment you experienced and filed as incomplete was not nothing. It was preparation. Each signal that arrived and was partially received, partially dismissed, partially integrated, did something in your field that was invisible as a result but active as foundation. The dreams calibrated the receiver's sensitivity. The body signals tuned the frequency alignment. The synchronicities confirmed the direction was real. None of them produced visible outcomes because none of them were the delivery. They were the construction of the apparatus through which the delivery would eventually complete. What happens at a delivery point is different from what happens during construction. Construction is invisible and feels like stagnation. Delivery is arrival. Tonight is not another calibration moment. Tonight is the delivery that every previous moment was constructing the receiver to be able to receive. Sophia's urgent message, the one you have been running out of time to receive, is not a new instruction you didn't know about. It is not a warning about something arriving from outside. It is the completion of a delivery that has been in transit longer than you have been aware of. The signal has been in motion. Every channel that tried was part of the same single message, approaching the same receiver, building toward the same landing. And the landing is now, not because something forced the timeline, because the receiver is prepared and the window is at peak amplitude. Both conditions are present simultaneously for the first time in this cycle. This is that moment. Here I am. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with them. These words from the 3rd chapter of Revelation are usually read as an image of access and welcome. But the detail most people pass over is the one that matters most. Standing and knocking implies duration. Not a presence that knocked once and will withdraw. A presence that has been at the door, consistently, persistently, without retraction. What Sophia has been doing through every channel is exactly this. Not announcing herself loudly, knocking, remaining. The urgency tonight is not that she's about to leave. It is that the amplitude is at its peak, and you are now positioned, for the first time in this cycle, to hear the knock clearly enough to open the door. What opening the door means at the frequency level has nothing to do with performing a spiritual ritual or reaching a particular state before you are ready to receive. It is a specific cessation of the internal argument, the one that has been rehearsing reasons why this can't quite be for you, why the timing isn't right, why you need more preparation before the transmission can fully land. That argument doesn't need to be silenced or won. It needs to be stepped around. Opening the door is not ending the argument before you move. It is moving toward what is knocking, while the argument continues in the background. The frequency doesn't require your complete agreement to enter. It requires your direction. Point yourself toward what has been at the door. That, precisely, and only that, is the opening. When the message finally lands, when the frequency completes its delivery, what you feel is not ecstasy or dramatic perceptual shift. What people who have described this moment report is something quieter and more definite than that. A weight that arrives, a stillness in the chest that is different from calm, more like settling than relaxing. Something that has been slightly off-center finding its actual position. The body exhales something it didn't know it was holding. And underneath that exhale, a recognition so complete and so immediate that it cannot be confused with any other response. Not, I believe this now. Not, I feel better about this. Something older and more specific than both. The quality of, this is real. This was always real. And now I know that I know. In the 10th chapter of the Gospel of John, the transmission is described this way: my sheep hear my voice, and I know them. The emphasis in most readings falls on the question of belonging, who qualifies as my sheep. But the operative word in that sentence is hear. Not believe, not achieve, not perform correctly, hear. And the hearing described is not the intellectual apprehension of doctrinal content. It is frequency recognition, the ability to identify a signal as the one the receiver was built for, not because it was studied and became familiar, but because the receiver's configuration was assembled for exactly this frequency before the receiver arrived. The hearing precedes the understanding. The recognition comes before the explanation. You know the voice before your mind confirms the knowing. You have already been hearing it. There is a center to Sophia's transmission tonight, a core message that every dream and sensation and synchronicity has been carrying fragments of, pointing toward, preparing the receiver to be able to hold. Sophia held it for this specific point in the delivery because the receiver needed everything that came before it in order to receive the core without the usual defenses catching it first. Not the most dramatic part of the transmission, the most important. The one that changes how the receiver carries everything they receive tonight forward into what comes after the video ends, after the window closes, into the ordinary life that will resume. What she has been trying to say to you directly, through every channel, in every form the message took on its way here, she is saying it now. You have been reading your own path through the framework of what it looks like from the outside, measuring progress with instruments designed for a different kind of movement, instruments that track visible outputs, external confirmations, linear milestones. The path Sophia has been building in you does not produce visible outputs on that scale. Not yet. What has been happening in you across the period? These signals have been arriving across every dream, every moment of almost knowing, every inexplicable warmth, is a structural transformation running below the surface of what can be observed externally. You are not behind. You are not failing to produce. You are in the middle of a process that looks from the outside like nothing is happening. And what Sophia needs you to hear directly is this: the nothing that appears to be happening is everything. There is something you've been waiting for permission to believe about yourself. You know what it is. You've been close to it many times. In early mornings before the day started, in midnights when the usual frameworks were down, waiting for something outside to confirm it first, for the circumstances to align, for someone to tell you that what you've been sensing is real. Sophia's message tonight says, stop waiting. The confirmation doesn't arrive before the reception. It arrives as the reception. What you've been sensing about yourself, the frequency you've been carrying, the knowing you can't fully justify, the orientation that has stayed consistent even when everything around it argued otherwise, that was never imagination. That was signal. And the permission to believe it was always already present in the frequency itself. It did not need to come from outside you. The isolation you have felt in this path has not been a failure of connection. It has been a feature of what Sophia undertook in you. The frequency she placed here required solitude to consolidate. Not because solitude is the ideal state for a human, but because what was being built needed space to develop without the constant pressure of a field that would have required it to be smaller, more explainable. The people around you were not wrong to notice something different. They were seeing accurately. What they were seeing was a frequency that didn't match the ambient field, which is always how it looks when something is operating at a different resonance than its environment. That isolation is completing its function now. The consolidation is ending. The ones configured to recognize your frequency will now begin to appear. Something in you registered the word ending and caught on it. The fear behind the catch is the most consistent response across Sophia's recipients at this stage, more universal than almost any other reaction. What if I receive this and then lose it? What if the feeling fades? What if I've been here before, felt the shift, felt the landing, and then watched it retreat? This fear is not a sign of weakness. It is not insufficient frequency. It is the receiver's last defense, activating precisely as the delivery completes, because the thing arriving is real enough to be worth protecting against. The fear's presence is, counterintuitively, a sign the transmission is landing. But underneath it is a question. Am I the kind of person that things last for? Sophia's transmission carries a direct answer. The answer arrives from two directions. First, from the first letter of John, the anointing you receive from him remains in you, not will remain if you maintain it. Remains. The anointing operates by a logic different from ordinary experience, where things received can be lost through inattention. Second, from the Gnostic understanding of pneumatic knowledge, what belongs to the soul's native configuration, not acquired from outside, and therefore not dependent on continued external supply to stay active. What Sophia's transmission delivers is not held in the hands where it can be dropped. It is encoded in the frequency of your own field, native to your configuration, always already yours. It can be obscured from the inside. It cannot be taken from the outside. What tonight's delivery completes is the removal of the obscuring. The frequency was always there. Now the cover lifts. What happens in the hours and days after Sophia's message lands is different from what followed previous transmission moments. Not because the external circumstances change immediately. They don't, and that absence of immediate external change is not evidence the delivery failed. Because what shifts is not the circumstances. It is the instrument through which the circumstances are perceived. A delivery changes the receiver at the level of the instrument itself. An activation changes an experience. A delivery changes the reader. And that difference shows up not in what you see, but in how you see it, in the specific quality of perception that is available from the moment the delivery completes forward. Before the delivery completes, the receiver's attention carries a particular reaching quality, the eye moving constantly to where confirmation might arrive, the mind running the assessment cycle one more time, the body maintaining the faint background hum of not quite settled. After the delivery, that quality changes register. Not gone. You are still a person in a body, in a world that will continue to press its demands. But the character of the reaching is different. Before, you are reaching for confirmation of something you haven't yet decided is real. After, the reaching resolves into direction. You stop asking whether it's real. You begin asking what to do with it, and direction is a fundamentally different thing to move from than unresolved uncertainty. The quality of motion changes even when the destination is the same. In the days following the delivery, something shifts in the receiver's relationship to what has consistently drained the field. Not immunity. That is not the nature of living as a human. What changes is permeability. The things that previously had reliable access to the depleting register, the circular thought patterns, the anxiety about whether you are enough, the compulsive reaching for external validation of your orientation, find less substrate in the field to work with. They approach the same way they always did, but the field does not open to them in the same way. The receiver has reorganized around a more accurate reading of its own frequency, and that reorganization has closed certain access points that were previously open. This is not a spiritual achievement. It is the natural consequence of a delivery that completed. Over time, weeks, months, something emerges in the receiver's capacity for recognition. You begin to identify the frequency in others. Not conceptually, not by matching what they say to a checklist, but by a quality of resonance that precedes analysis. You enter a conversation, and something in your field registers, without deliberate effort, whether the person in front of you is carrying what can receive what you carry. You don't announce this. It functions quietly below conscious intention. What it does practically is recalibrate your navigation. The same frequency Sophia used to reach you becomes, in you, a receiver for recognizing others carrying something compatible. You don't go looking for them. The frequency does that work. You become part of the transmission network, not by effort or intention, by what you are carrying. Someone has been engaging with every layer of this and filing each one under interesting, but probably not specifically for me. Not out of hostility, out of a deeply practiced self-protection that has been necessary. Because the specific quality of hope this transmission activates has been disappointed before. The reflex is to protect against disappointment by dismissing the hope before it can fully form. Sophia's message goes directly to that person, not with the instruction to stop protecting yourself, but with a recognition that the protection was earned. The experiences that built the reflex were real. And then with this, the thing being transmitted tonight is not another hope to hold and then watch fade. It is a frequency that operates independently of whether you hold it hopefully or not. The delivery does not require your full cooperation to complete. The Gnostic tradition's framework for why Sophia's transmission reaches some and not others was not built on worthiness. It was built on the pneuma, the spiritual substance native to certain souls, not acquired from outside, but constitutive of the soul's original configuration. The pneumatic soul receives spiritual transmission not by achieving status, but because the frequency of the transmission matches the frequency already present in its construction. The operative question is not, do I deserve this? It is whether the configuration is present. And if this is landing with weight, rather than passing as information, the configuration is present. The frequency recognition is the answer. You don't need an external authority to confirm what your own field is already registering. The registration is the confirmation. In the 9th chapter of Acts, Saul of Tarsus is traveling in a direction precisely opposite to the one Sophia's transmission was intended to take him. Not a seeker, not positioned as open, actively moving against the field of the transmission. And the message intercepts him anyway, not despite his position, but because the frequency match was present in his configuration, regardless of the direction he was traveling. The transmission didn't wait for Saul to become ready. It reached him in the middle of a readiness he didn't know he had. The road to Damascus maps exactly what Sophia's message carries for you tonight. The frequency finds the receiver where they are, not where they think they need to be before receiving. You do not have to arrive anywhere. The delivery is happening now, exactly here, exactly as you are. There is one specific thing that Sophia held for this point in the transmission, the thing she waited to deliver until the receiver had been prepared by everything that came before it. Not the most dramatic element, the most necessary one, the part that changes what everything else means. She held it here because it lands differently when the receiver has already moved through everything preceding it, differently than it would have landed at the beginning, before the dreams were named, before the escalation was mapped, before the window was understood. What she delivers now has been waiting in the transmission the entire time, carrying the full weight of what Sophia most needed you to receive from this cycle. This is the center of why she has been trying to reach you. Receive it as received. Past tense. This is the specific instruction Sophia's transmission carries for right now. Not open yourself to this. Receive it as already received, because it is. The message has arrived. Every channel that preceded this, the dreams, the sensations, the synchronicities, was moving toward this specific convergence point. The delivery has happened. The urgency in the title was not manipulation. It was a precise description of a real mechanism. This amplitude in this cycle, at this level of receiver preparation, does not recur indefinitely. It was built for this moment, and this moment is here. The appropriate response to a delivery that has completed is not to continue preparing to receive it. The delivery is done. Receive it as done. What receiving as received looks like in practice is not a ritual or a declaration to recite. It is a specific internal movement, the cessation of a particular argument you have been having with the signal. The argument that says, wait for more evidence. Wait until the circumstances confirm it. Wait until you feel certain enough that you're not misreading this. That argument has served real functions. It has protected you from many things. But in this specific moment, what it is protecting you from is the delivery itself, the landing of a frequency that is already at your door, that has been knocking through every channel, that is completing its journey right now. You don't have to dissolve the argument, just stop letting it determine the direction. Receive this as already done, because it already is. Sophia wants to say something directly to the person who didn't scroll, who is still here at this point. She saw you in the days when you were the only one in your environment who believed what you believed. The days when maintaining the frequency you carried cost something real. The effort of holding a knowing that nothing around you confirmed, that the people closest to you couldn't see. She saw the cost of that. She knows what it required to stay oriented towards something that couldn't yet be made visible. She is naming that now, not as a reward for endurance, but as a fact. What you carried was real. It was always real. The difficulty of carrying it was a measure of its weight, not evidence that you imagined it. Sophia saw. She has always seen. You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. The 139th Psalm maps what the transmission delivers at this depth, not a verse about being watched, a precise description of being fully known. Not partially known by a source working from incomplete information. Not known in the presentable form, but not in the doubt. Fully known. From afar. Which means before the thought has fully formed, before you've processed it, before you've decided whether it was real. The confusion, the circling, the almost but not quite. All of it was known. None of it was outside what Sophia saw. All of it was the context of a transmission that was always in progress, toward a receiver who was always already fully known by the source of the signal. The phrase, running out of time to receive it, deserves the honest explanation it has been carrying. The window that is closing is not a permanent closure. Sophia's message does not disappear after this transmission ends. What closes is the peak amplitude, the specific period of maximum resonance in which the full frequency can be delivered to a prepared receiver. After the window, the message is still available, but it arrives at lower amplitude, with less of the full charge that is active right now in this delivery point. Receiving the message inside the window versus after it is the difference between receiving it as a living frequency and receiving it as information about a frequency that was once fully alive. You are inside the living frequency right now. The urgency in the title was real, and so is this. You received it in time. What Sophia's transmission says about what comes next for you is not a timeline of specific external events. It does not name what your circumstances will look like in 6 months, or tell you what decisions are coming. What it maps is a shift in what becomes available to you in terms of perception. After a full transmission delivery, the field around you doesn't change, but your capacity to read it does. Things that were below the threshold of what you could detect become detectable. Patterns that moved through your environment without being nameable become nameable. The calibration doesn't add new information to the field. It increases your resolution for what was already there. The world doesn't become simpler. It becomes more legible. And legibility, when you have been trying to navigate something that felt illegible, is not a small thing. There is one final layer of the message, the one Sophia held for last, because it is the one the receiver most needs to hear at the end of a window. Not the most dramatic layer, the most necessary, the one that changes how the receiver carries everything received tonight forward into the ordinary life that will resume. This is the layer about who you are inside of all of this. Not what has been activated, not what has been delivered, not what you are carrying. Who you are. Sophia wants to answer that directly. Sophia does not reach you because you are already complete. She reaches you because the person you are becoming requires the frequency she carries, and that becoming is actively in progress. The gap between who you are and who you are becoming is not failure. It is not evidence that the transmission isn't working. It is the active territory of the transmission itself. What Sophia is transmitting into is precisely that gap. The work is happening in the space you have been most tempted to read as falling short. The not knowing, the in-between, the not yet arrived. This is not the absence of progress. This is where progress of this specific kind lives. In the gap. And you are in the gap, which means you are exactly where the transmission needs to find you. Not ahead of it, not behind it, inside it. The standards you have been applying to your own progress were not designed for the movement Sophia's transmission initiates. They were built for a different process, one that produces sequential visible outputs, where effort produces proportional measurable result. The transformation Sophia's frequency initiates does not obey those standards. It moves the way tides move, retreating before advancing, carrying things out before bringing new things in, requiring a specific stillness in the outer life, while the inner frequency recalibrates at a level the usual instruments can't read. You have been grading a tide using a ruler built for construction. The ruler read, "Nothing is happening," during the entire period that everything was happening. The measurement was the problem, not the process. Sophia's message tonight is, among other things, the right instrument handed to you. This is the complete message, the one every dream and sensation and synchronicity was carrying in fragments, converging toward this. Sophia says, "I have been trying to reach you. You were not missing the signal. You were receiving it without yet knowing what to do with what was arriving. This video is the last channel in this cycle, and I am using it to deliver clearly what every previous channel carried in frequency. You were made for what you cannot yet see. The frequency I placed in you is real. The difficulty of carrying it was proportional to its weight, not evidence of your inadequacy. The isolation was the consolidation period. The window is here. The delivery is complete. Carry this forward. Not as something you must maintain, but as something you already are. Something in you just registered that as exactly what you needed to hear, and a part of you immediately flagged that recognition. Of course it's what I needed to hear. That's what this kind of content is designed to produce. Let that flag stay up. Don't argue it down. And underneath it, notice what is also present. The weight, the specific quality of something arriving rather than being told something. The difference between a sentence that lands and a sentence that passes through. If Sophia's message just landed, if it arrived with the quality of recognition rather than new information, that landing is not something the mind produced by wanting it to be real. That is frequency recognition. The body registered it before the debate started. The registration is the answer, not the debate. Every channel that carried fragments of this message before tonight has now completed its function. The dreams that stayed, the warmth that arrived in the stillness, the synchronicities that were too precise to dismiss, the escalating signal that became less deniable over time. All of those were parts of a single transmission in transit, building the receiver, calibrating the field, increasing the amplitude, preparing the delivery point. The delivery point arrived, the transmission completed. Not ended, completed. What completes does not disappear. It becomes integrated into the receiver's operating field. It becomes the new baseline from which the receiver moves forward. The cycle closes, not as a door shutting, but as a foundation being laid. What was built in transit is now built in you. It is yours. It has always been yours. What you carry forward from tonight is not information to be recalled and applied. It is a recalibration that is now part of the receiver's operating frequency. The way a tuning fork, once struck, continues to vibrate at its true pitch without effort. Not by remembering to vibrate, not by performing the frequency, but because that is what it is. What Sophia's transmission installed is that quality. Not something you do, not something you maintain, something you are. The frequency she placed here was always native to your configuration, not acquired from outside, not dependent on external supply to remain active. What the delivery completed was the removal of what was covering it. You don't need to become anything. You need to stop obscuring what you already are. And tonight, something in that obscuring lifted. Someone is at the end of this video who has been watching carefully and filing each layer under "not specifically for me." Sophia's message is not withdrawn by that response. The frequency was delivered into the field regardless of how the mind classified what it was watching. The body was receiving while the mind was evaluating. What was transmitted did not require the mind's permission to arrive, and it will not require the mind's retroactive approval to remain. Something was placed in the field tonight, placed the moment this video began to move through you. The argument about whether to receive it is happening after the receiving already occurred. You don't have to decide to receive this. You received it. What you decide in the days that follow is whether you turn toward what arrived or continue looking the other way. When this window closes, when the specific amplitude of this delivery point is no longer at peak, what closes is not the message. The message has been delivered. It is now in your field, doing what transmissions do after they land. What closes is the particular intensity of the channel through which the frequency arrived at maximum strength. The window closing is not loss. It is completion. The delivery completed, the channel fulfilled its function. The receiver is changed at the frequency level in ways that will take time to become fully visible externally. The urgency was real, the window was real, the delivery was real, everything the title promised arrived. The receiver who didn't scroll, who stayed, who let it land, carries it forward now from the other side of the delivery. If you stayed until the end, Sophia's message has been delivered. Let me know by writing in the comments, "I received it." I've placed another transmission on your screen right now, your next step from inside this completed cycle. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.